Hey, I'm just going to take 30 seconds here to talk with you, check in to see how you've been liking the episodes of the podcast. If you find that the podcast episodes resonate with you, if they make sense to you, if you've been enjoying them, that's great. I'm really happy. And so I want to tell you about how you can learn more about me and working with me. The best place to find me is on my website, which is www.juliephillipshatch.com. And there you can read more about me. There's a link where you can buy my book if you'd like, A Parenting Revolution for Higher Evolution, Raising Resilient, Responsible, Compassionate Kids from the Inside Out. There is also a link for the quiz to find out the personality type of your child, which is the quiz for the element type of your child, which I talked about in the first few episodes of the podcast way back in September. There is you can read my blogs. I have blog posts. So there's stuff to see on my website. And there's a way that you can set up a time to talk with me if you want. You can send me an email and we can figure out a time that is mutually agreeable for us. Or you can go to the Calendly link and we can set up a time. And really, we just start out with having a conversation because I would love to hear about what you're struggling with, what your questions are. Because this parenting thing with all of the worries and the doubts and the not sure what to do and the stresses, it's not easy and you don't need to do it alone. So I'd be happy to talk with you, just have a conversation with you. And then from there, we can decide if you want to do one-on-one sessions or a parenting program or a number of things that happen after that. But to start with, you want to go to juliephillipshatch.com. And I'm so glad that you've been listening to my podcast. Thanks. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the parenting podcast called Mums on a Mission with me, your host, Julie Hatch. Glad that you are here today. And I have a guest with me today. Love talking with these guests. This one is really talks about some interesting stuff. Her name is Rita Morris. And Rita is a parenting coach. And she helps parents understand their parent voice and to create and uphold strong boundaries with their kids, I think she means, which is interesting. She helps with disrespectful and uncooperative behavior and the consequences of such behavior. She helps kids to learn how to make good decisions for themselves. Wonderful thing. So welcome, Rita Morris. Glad to have you here on this podcast.
Thanks, Julie. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, your background, how you got into this, what your framework is, if you can do that, just a little bit more about you.
Absolutely. So I have been actually working as a parent coach for the better part of 8 years. I started my career as a therapist, and I worked primarily at the beginning of my career with adolescents. And as I got to do this work, so much of what I felt was, wow, if parents could do things in ways that were better, more effective, kids would be better off. And so I started to feel frustrated, like I wasn't doing the work in the way that I guess could have been or should have been doing. So I started to think about maybe working with parents would be a better avenue for me to take. And then I had my first child, and I was like smacked in the face with what the reality of parenting actually was.
Yeah.
And it became actually a more powerful calling for me, because I felt at the beginning of my career as a mom, I felt so lost and so overwhelmed with the responsibility of parenting. And I just sort of felt like, you know what? People don't need to feel like this. And I really wanted to help people to not feel that piece of overwhelm and anxiety about what they were doing. And so as part of my own journey, I started reading all these parenting books. And, as you do that, you see there's like 10,000 different perspectives, right?
Yeah.
So finally, what I said to myself was, I really need to figure out what works for me. I knew that at the end of the day, my kids needed stability and consistency and love and to be able to trust. And so I was like, okay, that's pretty universal. Any parenting
Yeah.
person will say that. So now I'm going to go from there and sort of tune into what my own values are and what are the things that I feel strongly I want to teach my kids, and how do I want to teach my kids those things. And so as I developed as a parent, I became more and more passionate about working on the parenting side of things. So then I just little by little have, transformed my practice into primarily parent coaching.
Yep. Nice. So you do less therapy or counseling to the kids and adolescents. You work more with the parents, which is
Yes.
really going to the source of really helping the kids, I think.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. People ask me, do you coach the kids? And I'm like, not really. I'm not in the house. I want the parents to be able to do what they're looking to be able to do.
Yes.
Now, you said, I see in your background, you have 2 kids.
Yes.
Are they unique in any particular way? I think you use the word special needs.
Yes, and they both are, absolutely, yes. Both of my kids struggle with ADHD and anxiety, and they both are very high functioning autism. So yes, they both have been most certainly challenging,
Yeah.
In many ways. And I always say they are my greatest teachers.
Yes, they really are. And I've
Mhm.
heard people say that time and time again, and it's absolutely true. If we will just let ourselves relax a little and see what they have to offer, which is a lot.
It's amazing how much they have to offer. Really, the wisdom that comes out of their mouths is just incredible.
Yeah. Wow. So you got your hands full.
That's for sure.
So I wanted to talk, we had when we were talking about, or going back and forth about what we were going to talk about in this podcast, is that I think that that you help parents with conflict and possible divorce.
Mhm.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about that conflict within a family, especially between the parents. And the conflict, especially if it remains unresolved, I assume has a greater chance of leading to divorce. But it seems like, well, I don't know. Tell me what your approach is. It's more about conflict than the splitting up, although both of those are obviously really important. But so how would you like to talk about either one or both? Obviously, they're very interrelated.
So much of what I have learned in my process about what is so unsettling to kids is when there's conflict or stress in the home.
Mhm.
When kids see that there are tension and stress between their parents, it can really be off-putting for kids, and it can really be so unsettling for them. And so then I just started, reading and learning more, because I often with parents of kids who, I like to call complex kids, or kids who need a little extra, as I often will also say.
Yeah.
It really challenges a parental relationship, and so what I have heard so much of is, but I can't get divorced, because if I get divorced, then that's going to be so bad for my kids.
Yes.
And the truth of the matter is that it's not actually the divorce that's so detrimental to kids. It really is the conflict that comes either before or even after a divorce, that is so disconcerting for kids, and it produces so much anxiety for them. So I like to talk a lot about really what we want kids to have is, a peaceful environment,
Yeah.
and if there's sort of conflict rumbling underneath the surface all the time, kids are going to feel that. They're going to see it. They're going to feel it. We may not, and people will say, well, we never fight in front
Yeah.
of them. Right. Well, okay, that's great, but they feel it, and they know, and they're going to hear what goes on behind closed doors, because they do, and
Yeah.
they want to know, because feeling like they know means they have some sort of control over what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you saying that, so tell me how do you advise, first of all, anyone who wants to hear more about, learn more about Rita, is that you can go to her website. Can you tell it to me again, Rita? I'm sorry.
Yes, it's aparentspath.com.
Parentspath.com. And so I'm assuming that you coach parents through conflict and divorce as well.
Yes.
So are you saying with that that you want to, so what do you tell parents to do? Level with the kids? You don't want to let them know in on every single thing that's going on between the parents.
You definitely don't, they don't need to know all the details, certainly, but, to talk about, your parents are having trouble getting along right now. There are some issues that we just have not been able to resolve. We can't seem to meet in the middle or compromise, or, I like to talk a lot about values, because I feel like it's when values are in conflict is when we bump into conflicts that we really can't resolve,
Yeah.
in any way. So it's just being honest with them about, so here's what's happening for us. We're
Yep.
really, really struggling right now. Kids will ask questions. They'll ask you endless questions.
Yeah.
Well, what are you fighting about? And I always like to say, give them the information that's developmentally appropriate for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And when they get to the point where they stop asking questions, that's when they've heard enough.
Okay. Very good point. Yeah.
Follow their lead. They will let you know when they've heard enough.
Yeah. Good way. That's a good way to put it. Good way to good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah.
um, my, um, it sort of surprises me. I don't know. The divorce rate is obviously still really high, and it really kind of surprises me that parents can't be a little more adult-like when they are dealing with conflict with kids.
It's astonishing how people can get so caught up. I often think about, like, okay, so what's really happening here for a parent? I had this one couple that I dealt with that they came to me. They were literally on the verge of going back to court over kindergarten, or what seemed to be the issue of kindergarten. It was half day versus full day. And the mom wanted the daughter to go half day, and the dad wanted her to go full day. When we pulled it all apart, what it really came to be was that the dad was feeling like, well, if she goes half day, then you're going to have so much more time with her than I am.
Yeah.
And so it came down to, like, but what about me and my time with my daughter? So when you tease it all apart, I think if you can get to what it's really about,
Yeah.
it's easier for people to remember, like, what's at stake here.
Yeah. That's a very good example. Yeah.
Yeah. And once we got to what the real issue was, it was so easy to say, okay, if the issue is really about time together, let's make some changes to a parenting plan so that, there's not this great disparity,
Yeah. Yeah. And that's doable. I'm sure that you were able to figure that out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Because so much, I had mentioned to you that I'd been through a divorce, and we went through a mediator. It was a very amicable kind of a divorce. Still, the kids, I always was afraid of how it's going to affect the kids, which I want to ask you about also. But we were very, it was amicable, and there was no outward fighting. It was sort of a weird kind of a divorce. But we did this nesting thing that I had told you about, which is not easy, and it only worked because we both came from a place where we really had the kids' interest at heart, center and foremost, and not our own. The kids stayed in the house, and he and I would go back and forth between another place and the house. And so the kids stayed there. They were in their environment. They were in the neighborhood. They were in the same school. There was no back and forth. It worked really, really well, and it was only worked really well because he and I could make it work.
Yes.
So,
yes.
it's a pretty cool alternative. I don't think it's done a whole lot, but like I say, it takes a special kind of person, I think, to be able to put up with it. But anyhow, so what do you see are the effects of divorce and or conflict on kids that we should most be aware of?
First and foremost, I think it causes a tremendous amount of anxiety for kids, because they feel like what's going to happen next, like sort of that
Yeah.
like you're walking on eggshells kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So there's a tremendous amount of anxiety that comes with it. There's a feeling of um, not feeling like you're safe, not feeling like you can trust the grownups around you to manage what's happening.
Yeah.
Because if you can't manage conflict, then what can you manage? So
Yeah.
it's very disconcerting on so many levels. And then there's the piece of relationships, as the kids get older, they learn so much from us about
Yeah.
relationships just by watching what we do. I always say to parents, like, nobody teaches our kids how to walk and how to talk. They do it because they see us doing it and they hear and they want to know, they want to grow and they want to learn. And so modeling is so powerful for kids. So, to not be able to have a healthy relationship in any way really puts your kids at a disadvantage. And when I say healthy relationship, I mean, one where there's mutual respect more than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Communication must be part of that also, having a healthy relationship.
Communication is so important, and it's that really authentic kind of communication about like what's really like what's pushing those buttons, what's causing this reaction from you is really always what I want to ask people is like, so what's really happening here for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And that takes a little bit of work, I think.
Take some digging around. Yeah.
Yeah. But there is always, and I think like your example with the kindergarten, it's resolvable once you figure out the why. That's also what I talk about with behavior. There's always a why behind everything. There's a why behind the conflict, a why behind the divorce, and if you get to the why, that's huge.
It is huge. I always say that to parents, like, listen to the behavior of your kids because they're trying to tell you something.
Yeah. Yep. They are. That's their way of communicating.
Absolutely.
At
Absolutely.
every different age too. Do you see any different how the difference between ages, like a toddler versus early school versus a middle school versus high school, and how they are affected by divorce?
You know, I mean, I wouldn't really say that there's any kind of universal that goes across, the ages. I think I will say when kids get to a place where they can have some level of cognitive understanding, I think it makes it a little bit easier, so
Sure.
if you have an infant who, is 3 days with mom and 3 days with, dad, it's a little confusing because they have no understanding of,
Mm,
and then people are disappearing, when you're a baby and people aren't in front of you, they're gone forever,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
So I think it can be a little easier for kids as they have, some level of cognitive understanding.
yeah,
Um, but at different stages, I think there's always different pieces that, make it harder. Say, for example, age 4 and 5 is when kids really start to really kind of comprehend the meaning of death and loss, like in any real concrete way. And so then
uh-huh,
if you have parents of a 4 and 5-year-old who are getting divorced, it's going to impact them on that level of loss, so it just really depends on ages and stages.
yeah, yep,
The one thing that I will say is universal is if parents can work together, simply on parenting their kids, that's going to be the universal. That's always going to be the positive across the board. It
yeah,
doesn't matter what ages they are. If you can really work together, in ways that are simple, of course, parenting is never simple, but just, you know, just work together so that your kids feel like they have some semblance of a team behind
yeah.
them.
So
Um,
do you work with parents in that? Do you counsel them in how to do that? How to
I
give a
do. I
better.
do a lot of co-parenting stuff. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
important. And you think that, again, having been through it, my kids are grown, they're all in their 20s and into 30, and you still have to co-parent. Like your mother for life, really, and father for life, you have to be able to figure it out.
You do have to be able to figure it out. And your kids are really lucky that you and your ex have been able to really like to do this together. The nesting thing is a tremendous gift to your kids.
Yeah, they have said so. They have said as much also. I wish it could happen more, but anyways, have you ever heard of it, or have you ever worked with anybody trying to do it?
I have never worked with anybody who's been, I will say, who's been, I, I think I would say courageous and selfless and creative enough to
Yeah,
try to make it work.
yeah.
It is very rare. Yes.
Well, it didn't work forever, but it worked for a good amount of time.
Any period of time that you can pull it off for, is extraordinary. And just to think about the example that sets for your kids.
Yeah, yeah, yep, I think so. Um, so what ways does ongoing conflict impact our kids now and in their future? So if they always are surrounded by conflict, how are they impacted? And again, like you said, in the future.
Again, it's that anxiety. There's depression that can come along with it. There's the inability to establish healthy relationships and communication patterns.
Yeah,
If you see people who are constantly in conflict and can't communicate in ways that are healthy and effective, it's so hard for you to learn that on their own because things get ingrained in you when you're little.
right, right,
you
right.
know
And like you say, the parents are the role models.
Big time.
That's how you learn, how they learn. How else are they supposed to learn about life?
Absolutely, yes. So it makes it really hard in the future to be in a relationship. It makes it hard to trust,
Yeah,
especially. I would say trust and communication, I think, are the two biggest.
yeah, that is big. Yeah. Okay. So is there anything you've talked about how you coach parents to talk with their kids and to role model? Anything else that you can add to saying that what you advise to parents or suggest to parents?
When there's ongoing conflict, I often will say to parents, think about your co-parent as a coworker.
Mm.
And if what you're about to say wouldn't come out of your mouth at work, then don't say it. Because if you're at work and you say something that's inappropriate, there's going to be consequences, right?
Yeah,
No different with a co-parent, but the consequences are less concrete and they're
yeah,
less immediate.
yeah,
So we don't think about what they are. But so I always will say, think about this person as a coworker, and you're on the same team, and the team is you're trying to raise healthy, happy kids.
yeah, yeah. That's a good one. Just like a coworker. Wow, that shut a lot of people up, I think.
Right? I mean, because we think more in that setting than we do in our home setting. So
Yeah,
we should, I theoretically, I'll put that level of effort into communicating.
it's
you
very
know
true.
yeah.
It's very easy to snap and to not think when you're talking with a potentially ex, or an ex. So do you work with parents? Well, certainly I imagine through divorce and post-divorce. Do you
Mhm.
put even more effort or not into the conflict resolution before it gets to the point of divorce? And
No,
okay,
no, that would not definitely not be my specialty.
okay, all right. So you do helping with the kids through the divorce and the effects of during the divorce and afterwards.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that is really good, interesting information. I like that. Talk to your spouse like they're a coworker and think about what you're going to say because the ramifications are huge. And like you say, they're subtle and you don't see them for until years down the road, perhaps,
Hmm.
but they are all there.
They're there and they
Yeah.
are big. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. In terms of anxiety and depression, either related to divorce or just in general, is there anything that you have to say to parents about that? Because I see that anxiety and depression in kids is growing. I mean, never mind COVID, that added a whole other thing. But even before COVID, anxiety and depression are big problems with kids. Do you have anything? And that's kind of a very general statement I just said, but I don't know if you have. How do you work with parents around anxiety and depression in their kids? And
I
if so,
do.
how? Okay.
I do a lot. And I feel like I'm right there with you. I see so much anxiety and depression in kids these days. It just blows me away. And I don't know what I would there's a few things that I feel like I would attribute it to, but um one of the things I think is that sort of people of my generation, when we were growing up, our parents never talked to us about feelings or emotions, or there was no like psychoeducation, or there was no circle time in school. There was none of that. And so we got none of that. And I feel like our generation of parents, my generation of parents, we're sort of going to the other
Yeah.
extreme, and we talk to our kids a lot about feelings and about emotions, and we think we're very, very mindful of how things impact them. And so sometimes I think we can go to the other extreme, where we try to protect our kids so much that
Yeah.
we put them at a disadvantage for managing the stuff that life is going to throw at them, because life is always going to throw stuff at kids.
Yeah.
So as much as hard as it is to sit with our kids and know that they're making mistakes, or they're making bad decisions, and there are going to be consequences of those decisions, like, give them the opportunity to make those decisions, both good and bad, and then help them, walk them through what the consequences are, and let them use those things as learning experiences, because that's going to build them up so much, just to trust that they can make good decisions,
Right.
and to trust that when they make bad ones, they can get through what the consequences are.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in teaching decision making skills to kids from a very young age.
Uh-huh.
Like, do you want the purple shirt or you want the blue shirt? Like, and it starts very small,
Yep.
obviously, in those really concrete kinds of ways. But I think giving kids the opportunity to make decisions and make mistakes and learn from them is so, so, so important for them.
Yeah, I would completely agree, because I just having a conversation like this earlier today with somebody, because eventually they get put into the adult world and they're going to have to figure it out. And now I always think that when they're young, when they have the luxury or the luck of having a parent, back them up, be behind them and supporting them through the bad decisions, is the time to do it, not throw them out into the adult world and hope that they flounder and figure it out. But when they're young, and I also think that experience, and that is choices and decision making, is the best teacher. As a parent, you can say, don't do this, don't do that, and until they make the mistake themselves. Making mistakes is the best teacher.
It 100%, it really is. And at the same time, it feels so counterintuitive to let your kids make those mistakes. It's that, like, are you going to let the kid touch the hot stove, or are you going to,
Yeah.
but what's the best way for them to learn? You can tell them it's hot, but is that really going to teach them?
Right.
Or,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's true. It's by making those mistakes and learning from those decisions that we learn. And, we can make accommodations for our kids, but the world is not going to make
That's
accommodations
for
for them.
sure. Yep,
You
exactly.
know?
They got to put on their big boy and big girl pants eventually.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
When you talk about helping parents set boundaries with their kids, that part of this whole thing in terms of decision making and teaching them about life, basically. Tell me more about the boundaries that you talk about.
It's kids need to have boundaries sort of drawn around them. They need to know what their limits are.
Mhm.
Otherwise, the world can feel so big
Mhm.
that it's going to create anxiety for them. They say if you get a new kitten, right, you should keep the kitten in one room for a period of time until it is more comfortable in its environment, right? So
Yeah.
I like to use the analogy of that for kids. Like, they need to have boundaries drawn around them so that they feel safe.
Yeah. So
you
true.
know
Yeah.
um a lot of us feel uncomfortable doing it because we feel like, oh, we're taking opportunities away from our kids, or it just feels uncomfortable to say no.
Right.
But when you think about what you're doing when you're saying no, is you're setting that boundary for your kids.
Yeah.
It's easy for them to say, but I want to sleep over so and so's house for the third night in a row, and I promise I'll sleep, mommy, I promise, I promise, I promise. But their kid brain isn't going to let them sleep when they're with their best friend, and it's midnight and they're so tired. Their kid brain isn't going to be able to
Right.
have the logical ability to say, you know what, my body really needs sleep, so I'm just going to go to sleep now.
Yeah. Right. 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 And boundaries in the form of rules, I also think helps kids to know what's expected of them. If they
A
have no,
hundred,
they
a
don't
hundred
know.
percent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and they need to know what's expected so that they can then govern their decisions by knowing what those boundaries are. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's boundaries everywhere in the world. We don't call them boundaries per se, but there's speed limits when we drive, and it's a boundary in essence.
Yep. And so if they decide to cross a boundary, if they're consciously aware of what they're doing, then they need to be aware of the consequences. If you're going to speed, you might get a speeding ticket.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as it's not a matter of life and death, I think that learning consequences, that's certainly part of growing up. That's part of the boundaries.
Your point is well taken, as long as it's not life and death. I mean, we do have to be the ones to sort of assess what the risk is,
Right.
for the kids, okay, like what level of mistake is this going to be?
Yeah.
But you're right, as long as the consequences aren't so dire, it's an opportunity for kids.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'll bet you're great at what you do. Well, I say that because I completely agree with everything you're saying. And that's a lot of this is the kind of stuff that I try to impart to parents as well. It's a really, I don't know, it's a healthy way to parent. And I think that it's also an easier way to parent, in a way that you don't have to feel like you have to control everything and do everything for your kid, but allow them to navigate their life. Kind of.
100%. I mean, I feel like up front, it takes more work, but the payoffs are so great for everybody, not just us, for everybody.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
And I love what I do. And every day I'm like, oh my God, I really get to do this for work.
That's so nice. What a great way to feel. Well, for everybody listening or watching, if you want to have a conversation with Rita, I think that she offers a free 30-minute consultation. Yeah,
absolutely.
aparentingpath.com. Her name is Rita Morris, and she can guide you through conflict with your spouse, divorce with your spouse, boundary setting for your kids. She's got a website, and you can learn more about her. So do you do both in-person and virtual coaching?
I do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, virtual is kind of important these days.
It sure is. Yeah. And I feel like, honestly, I feel like it's as effective as the in-person stuff for people.
Yeah. Yep. And I had mentioned it earlier about what I don't do. Do you work with kids with the parents, without the parents, or just strictly parents?
I do still sometimes work with kids because I really enjoy it. But
yeah,
my primary work is with parents. What I actually really love to do is I work with the parents and to sort of have a partner coach who works with the kids, and then to sort of work together with the whole family is such an amazing way to do this work.
Yeah.
I don't often get to do it in that way, but I love to do it that way as well.
That is a great idea. So you're covering all bases, really, because nobody's at fault more than the other. Nobody's at fault in the first place, but that's covering all bases.
Absolutely. And everybody feels like they have an advocate, in that way, which is really nice.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rita, we are just about done with time. Is there anything else that you would like to add or say before we wrap it up?
No, I want to say thank you so much for the time. And, I really enjoyed having this conversation, and I look forward to being able to support anybody who feels like they need the support.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm sure that you're going to be helpful to a lot of people. You can find Rita Morris at aparentingpath.com, and she'll spend even just a free half hour with her. You can talk to her about whatever's going on with you and your children or your spouse or whatever needs help. And Rita
absolutely.
All right. Well, Rita, thank you so much for being here. And to all the listeners and viewers, thanks for being here and listening to Rita talk about the work that she does. And I will see you next week.